Hey y'all, this is TCA Gaming, and in this video I am going to first go over some Pokemon consignments. One purchase that I made is up on my eBay now too, for like a vintage booster box. But I'm going to go over at the end of the video after the consignments some of my takeaway from Poke Knowledge Cards, his interview with Nat Turner. I think is he the CEO, president? He's like the head guy for PSA or whatever. So I'm not sure what his actual title is. It's probably literally in the title of his video, but I'm going to put his video down here in the description. That way, if you guys want to go check it out, there's definitely some bombs that were dropped in the video. They weren't very loud, but some of the stuff maybe affected me more so since I've been involved with the eBay vault since what I thought was inception, but not. That apparently is not the case. But let's go over the consignments first, and then we'll hit on some of that stuff here in a little bit. All right, so we have some Sailor Moon cards. You probably will not see these on my IG stories just because they are wearing like short skirts and some things like that. These are kind of old. Look at that, 94, basically predating anything Pokemon wise. Anyways, in fact, I'm not even going to show that one right there. Got a few Super Mario Brothers cards. Look at that, 1989. I think the oldest game that I played was Tetris. Taught me my math tables. All right, what do we have here? All right, we got a few BGS cards. Got an alternate art Beedrill. Got a Mewtwo V-Star. Got the Pikachu, Regidrago, Unknown V. Got a Dark Houndoom and a regular Houndoom from Neo Rev. This one does have a chip. Well, it's not like a chip. It's like a whole piece of the case itself missing, but the card, I believe, is just fine. Got a Blastoise EX, Classic Collection Charizard. Then we have the metal one. Got a Charizard EX. Got some of the first true alt-arts, I guess you could say. You got the Evian Snorlax. Well, it was a promo, so maybe not. Entei V. Some really nice modern cards. That Gardevoir was pretty expensive when Scarlet and Violet hit, if I'm remembering correctly. Got Irida. I think I pulled one in a video actually, and I sold it. It's like a CGC 9.5. I think it went for like 130 bucks, something like that. What else we got here? Got the Marnie, Mew EX. Got the Mewtwo. You can still find 151 UPCs fairly cheap. Some sites are running deals on them. So maybe take advantage of that while you can, because it's like while 151 is available, people really like it. Very much enjoy opening up the packs. They like collecting. Man, I've sold so many reverse hollows. Is there something going on with the post office and eBay standard envelope? I've had like 50 envelopes returned from the week of like April 20th through the 24th. Just seems kind of crazy. All right, last but not least, I do have a Team Rocket box. So this one took like 3 weeks to come in. Registered mail, man. It is so slow. Do got a few little small holes there, but everything on the box seems legit from what I could find. So yeah, this one is on my eBay for sale. Or it may not be by the time you guys see this video, if it happens to be more like a week out or a month out, or it may still be there. I don't know. I may have priced it too high. I put it at 10K just because there wasn't anything on there under 17, which the 17K was like first edition. I think the box's value is less than that, but when you're the only one on there, sometimes it pays off to wait a little bit. All right, so let me talk about the interview. There were several things in that video that kind of stuck out to me. There was something in the first like minute that kind of upset me, so I'm hoping that just didn't like set the tone. And this would have been more of like a personal thing, and I'll go over that at the end because I'd rather mention that at the very end. But there were several, like, to me this looks like a really nice, I don't know, it's like a pizza. It's got everything on it that you want, the perfect crust, perfect cheese, all that stuff. But then you go to pay for it, and it's like, all those little toppings that you added on, the stuffed crust, the meats, the extra cheese. I had some garlic butter put on the crust. I don't like all that. I don't like everything, but meats and cheeses, that's kind of my jam. But then you go to pay for it, and you realize, you could have just got the works, for half the price and all that other stuff added up individually. Because the more I'm looking at this, it's almost unsettling to see how many things that PSA will control, like within this process. And now that eBay, they're kind of removing themselves from it. They're allowing this process to be partnered with PSA. It's just kind of scary to think about where those fees could go if we become dependent on it. I think there's going to be some really good deals and ways to have cards liquidated so fast without ever putting your hands on it. But what is that going to do to the market? And then also, what's it going to do to your wallet? Just think, right now, if you're a normal seller on eBay, you're looking at what, like 14% fees or something like that on an item. So when you hear that, PSA might be at like 16 or so, that's not that much of a markup, right? I need to make sure my mic is on. All right, my mic is on. But that's a lot of low-end cards that are going to be inundated there. But at the same time, will it stay there? But like if you're doing it yourself, say you sell a card for $100, you got that 14% fee or whatever it is. Might be a little bit less, a little bit. My fees are different, and I can't tell you what those fees are, but just mainly because I'm contracted there, I've got a different fee structure that is, as long as I'm contracted with them anyways, and that's why I can't sell in certain places. But I think I've heard somebody just told me, because they were trying to get a deal on something, like, hey, I want you to save the 14% fees. And I'm like, that's not how it works for me. So if that's the case, $100, you as a seller, you'd think you clear 86, right? You got the shipping costs you got to worry about, but if you're sending it through auction, then that should come out of the buyer's pocket. But what they don't, you can find it in there, but what's not advertised is they actually charge you that 14% on the taxes that you pay as well. So say somebody buys something here in North Carolina, eBay is going to automatically charge. If they're in my county, you're looking at 7% tax that's going to be tacked on to that $100. So now it's $107. Well, the 14% comes off of the $107, right? So if you take 14%, of $7, you got roughly another 1% that you're looking at on $100. You're looking at that dollar. So now it kind of bumps up to 15%. So you clear the 85, whereas the buyer, they're paying 107 plus shipping. So they might be paying 112 or whatever it is. When you go international, it gets very complicated. Somebody I spoke with said that they were going to be adding on the eBay International Standard Delivery, so they're going to be incorporating eBay's process. Now, before I get into this whole process and why it can be really rough for buyers outside the United States, I use it myself. I use eBay International Standard Delivery. I actually switched out of it for a little bit, for about, it was probably between 3 and 6 months, just to see if it ramped up my sales internationally to offer my own services. I thought it would, but it really didn't. Although the customers who did buy from me during that time were very happy, and you're going to kind of see why. So if I use regular shipping services to ship up to usually 3 graded cards, 2 if it's CGC because they're heavier, or BGS because they're heavier as well, I can ship up to 3 PSA graded cards for under 8 ounces. And that price is going to be generally less than $20. However, that's where I'm shipping through first class postage mail. I have to deal with, any of the problems that come with it, any of the headaches. And then the buyer is supposed to pay customs on their end. Whether or not, however that works out, that can vary from seller to seller, and it causes issues with that too, because you get asked to do certain things. Through the eBay International Standard Delivery, it's a little different. They're going to pay your standard shipping charge that you would have domestically, and then on top of that, they're going to pay the international shipping charge, which eBay controls, and it's going to be from wherever they're at to their location. It's generally not the $20. I think it's because they use DHL or FedEx, and I think I've seen the base price to be around $28 or so, and then they're going to pay the custom and duties on top of that price. So sometimes it can be 5%. I've heard like 40%. So say 20% on average. I'm not really sure how accurate that number is either. But if something ever happens during, after it gets to the eBay shipping hub, their facility, I think they got one in Illinois. They got them in different places. You're covered as a seller. Doesn't really matter what happens. I've never had an issue after that. So that's great. That's why I use it. It's just less headache. I can print it out, ship it domestically. It delivers. We're good. But I don't know if you heard all those fees, but so if you're international and you're buying, you're going to pay your $100. Then you might pay, another $5.50 in your domestic shipping. You might pay another 28 plus, depending on where you're at. If you're Australia, it's going to be even higher than that. So just say $30 shipping there. So we'll say you're at 135 plus another $20, that you got for your customs and duties. So you're looking at like $155. And then as the seller, you don't collect and remit that other shipping or any of that other stuff. The eBay does that. However, you're the one getting charged the transaction fee cost on top of that, and they charge another 1.35%. I think it's 1.35. It used to be around that number. Additional for the transaction. So say you would normally get charged, your 14%. You're now going to get charged like 15.35, I think, percent. But it's not going to be on the $100 again. It's going to be on the 100 plus the 5 plus the 30 plus the 20, so on 155. So now you're looking at, say 15% off of that. You're looking at, a much higher percentage that you're paying off of the 100 that's really going to be coming out of your pocket. So the seller, the seller's losing additional percentage. You lose that 15% on say $50 or so, and it might even be more than that. You're losing another 7 to 8%. So you might be clearing 80 to 82, something like that. But your buyer, they're paying over $150. So now there's almost like a 2x multiplier gap in between what the buyer is paying and what the seller is actually getting from the transaction. So it just spreads it out. So EIS is, I like it because it's very hassle free, but I'm going to pay for it. My buyer, they're going to pay for it. And this is without using the eBay vault, or PSA vault whatsoever. This is just you selling it yourself, right? When you add in, this idea of, hey, I've got I've got a card that's graded or ungraded. I'm going to send it to PSA. Right, it's going to go to the PSA vault, and say it's raw. Now they're going to grade that card. You're going to pay for the grading fee, right? And then they're going to list it for you back on eBay, and it'll go straight to auction. They already in that interview he said he was going to charge the shipping cost. It was going to go to the buyer, and so you're looking at a higher percentage. Right off the bat, you're going to be charged from PSA to sell it on there. And the buyer on the other end is already looking at a higher cost, especially if they're internationally. So you're gonna clear less than that normal amount if you were selling it. And this is just the starting prices. Usually it starts low and it gets higher. And the thing about that is we're not incorporating any storage fees, withdrawal fees. Is it going to be extra to have them handle this entire process for you? If you go through a middleman, are you going to have to pay extra now through that middleman too? There might be additional postage that you have to pay to withdraw. And all these things make sense. Like, it's things that you will have to pay, but you may not necessarily think about these things before you just start sending cards off to a place. Like, it's very similar to Z&G's Consignment Plus. Like, I thought that was a great service. I didn't send a ton of cards to them, but the cards that I did send to them, it was easy. I didn't have to do anything. But I just know that I got paid out, and it was somewhere in the documents that he sent out showing all the sales, all the fees. How much did I look at? I didn't look at any of it. I saw the bottom line. I was like, oh, check it out. This card sold for this card sold for that. That's pretty cool. Oh, that one went really bad, but the reason that it can be kind of dangerous is you don't keep up with this stuff. Well, a lot of times when it's hands off, and then next thing you know, you're in the hole. And if you get people defaulting on payments because they actually owe more than what everything actually went for through the fees and that kind of stuff, then that could potentially make the other fees go up, the percentages go up. And on top of that, with PSA being such a huge player right here, and being what I'm seeing kind of develop almost like a monopoly, then they can raise those rates and you don't really have anything to say about it because you can't. You can just not give them your service, but it can, if you're dependent on that, or that was your business model, then you may not have any choice to go with something like using PSA services through their vault. And if you want to withdraw your stuff, now you've got an issue. Now you've got to pay these withdrawal fees, or the storage fees, or the listing fees, and all that kind of stuff can add up. And for me, there was other things that were mentioned too that was kind of scary. He said it, but he didn't say who. The raw card authentication wasn't now going to go to Florida, right? Where was raw authentication going before? It was going through CGC with the eBay, with the eBay authentication. They're in Florida, so it's not going to Florida anymore. So I would say it's very likely that now, instead of this being split where CGC is authenticating the raw cards and PSA is doing the graded cards, everything's probably just going to PSA, which again makes financial business sense for them. But now you don't have that competition there anymore. You don't have anybody kind of like cross-checking them. I'll give you an example of how it can cause issues. I had a card that was CGC graded. It was a blank card, and I pulled it out myself. I knew that it was blank. I knew that it was real. I sent it in. I didn't send it in with anything stating, hey, I've got this on video, I pulled it here, nothing like that. But it was already in their system because they grade those blanks. CGC graded it. I got it back. I sold it. It went over the 250 threshold. So when it went for authentication through PSA, they denied authentication because they couldn't verify that the card itself was in their system. But this is a CGC graded card. They labeled it as item like miscategorization, but that's just like a standard go-to that they do, and it's not actually the reason why. Like, I've had several cards like that put in as item miscategorization when it was just cards that were not in PSA system, or they didn't recognize them themselves. That's the only reasoning I can come up with. I did not get that from them stating that was the reason. The reason I got was the miscategorization, but it's always been on cards that CGC graded, but PSA would not. Now, what happens with raw cards, especially something like that, where before it would have went to CGC, they would authenticate it because they have it in their database. They know, they're aware of this particular variant of card that comes out. Of course, it's not an official release, but it was sent out an official release. It was a mistake by Pokemon, but they sent them out. Or at least we think it was a mistake. I mean, who knows? It says, please discard, but if they didn't discard it, I mean, that's on Pokemon. It's still a real card. It's got a Pokemon back on it, and it come in an official Pokemon product. What's going to happen now when that goes through authentication through PSA? Are they going to reject it? Before eBay authentication, they would say it was miscategorized, but then they would send it on to the buyer anyways, as long as it was as described. So I never had any issues that actually arose out of that, but it can cause problems. What about, I had a Tropical Mega Battle, the TMB Executor, the bilingual Executor, very high-end card, and I bought one on eBay, and it was labeled, on the PSA label that it was TMB, and I messaged the buyer. I was like, or not the buyer, the seller, and I was like, are you sure this is the non-glossy version? I want to make sure that I'm getting the trophy and I'm not just getting something that's been mislabeled. And they said, yeah, I'm 100% certain. I get the card in. Of course, it's not. It's actually just the very common Trainer Magazine bilingual Executor. You're talking about going from a 5-figure card to it was like a PSA 6. So it was like right around $10,000 or so, down to probably less than $100. And so when I contacted eBay about this, they were like, yeah, if this had been one day later, it would have went through eBay authentication, and we would have verified that it was legit. For this was a graded card. It went through it was graded by PSA. This is what it shows in their system, and just because the label is wrong, that's not our fault. You have to go to PSA about it. Like, I would have lost that. And what are they going to do? What would they do with that now? Like, that's a question that I have. Would they correct it? Would they? Because I was told by PSA representatives that is not covered with their buyback or the money back guarantee. They don't guarantee the labels, even though the label is what sold the card in this situation. So that's just one of the situations where I wish that there were still two different professional companies doing, handling this process, not just one handling all of the raw cards, handling all of the graded cards, handling the sending out to the buyers, handling the bringing in of the raw cards. And there's so many ways that more money can be captured. I think this is a fantastic move by PSA. I think they've definitely captured a way to reach a huge audience and be able to have a lot of soft income coming in. But I encourage any of you who are considering using these services, be cautious, be careful, make sure you read the fine print. It could really add up if not. Now, let me see. I did make a few notes. I'm going to look over here. So he talked about auto putting like the population in the title. For me, it was almost like he was alluding to saying, and this is Nat going back to the interview with Poke Knowledge Cards, that the title itself may be able to be rearranged. That would be great. Looking at the terms and conditions that we reviewed before, it was basically saying there was no changing up the title. However, if it's only auction, how are you going to, like, the pop in the title could cause issues, right? Especially if this is like right at the beginning of release. You're going to have somebody who has pop 1, right? And it goes in the title and it goes into auction. And by the time it ends 7 days later, you might have 100, 200, 500, 1,000 of that card, depending on what it is. Think about the Van Gogh Pikachu, how quickly that one got into the population. It exploded so quickly. So I think that would cause issues. I don't think it's necessarily needed in the title anyways. But like I said, the one good thing I did take from that is we may be able to change up the titles. We may be able to, I'm hoping that we can switch things around, pull things out like the year when it's not needed, pull things out like TCG or, whatever it is. If they fill in all that information, that's great. They've got a standard, but let us be able to manipulate it, put it the way that we want to, that's consistent. But this, again, it's going to be in PSA's eBay, not ours. So I don't know. Maybe they need their own set of consistency, and that's something that I could see them being constrained. I could see them holding on to those reins, really tight, not letting other people change up the titles as much, especially if you have it set to be immediately listed. How long is this title change going to take? Because once you get bids on an item, you can't change the title. Like, you can't go back and say, oh, well, now it's pop 4, now it's pop 100, or hey, I don't like the fact that you didn't, say that this is a reverse holographic card, those kind of things. No buy it now. I assume that they're going to add that in time, but that's definitely a downside. I don't offer buy now consignments because I don't feel like holding the cards, but having a buy now price in the vault, that's definitely going to have to be something that they add later on. At least in my opinion, that would be a plus. That would be something great that they could add to their services. However, not having it, I think there's going to be a lot of withdrawals from the eBay vault because they don't want to have them sent to auction. But at the same time, they may not want to risk, the higher fees coming in later on if they don't withdraw before those fees start incurring. Then talking about the speed, getting stuff out and listed within a day of being graded, that's pretty crazy. That's very optimistic, and you would see a very high turnover, I think, of people sending in modern cards, just perpetually buying stuff, sending it in. It could also make prices drive way down, way fast. We're going to see like the market just fully optimized, so quickly, I think. I did want to touch on the part about the abandoned cards. They said they've got their own eBay. That I haven't looked it up yet, but that's kind of cool that they're only selling them for like the minimum or the cost that it was going to be to grade the card. That is interesting because it makes me think that, what would they do with some people sent cards through that maybe they didn't necessarily think were high end, but say you send in one high end card in with 100 crappy ones, and it's not worth it to pay for the whole submission, so they just forget the whole thing. Then you've got that one high end card that somebody might get a deal on. I don't know. I guess it might be the exception, but it'd be kind of cool to look at that kind of stuff. I don't know why they wouldn't be able to just auction them off or sell them for whatever they want. If somebody didn't pay for their cards and it's been years or whatever, maybe it's just some kind of law that I'm not aware of, but I wouldn't have thought that they have to sell them for whatever they're going to charge them in the grading fees. Do you add in shipping or whatever else? Do you factor in the fees that you pay on eBay? So I don't know. That seemed a little weird to me, but if they're really doing that, that seems very like the least amount of money you could definitely take off of something like that. Oh man, their PSA buyback, dude, he butchered that. Like he was saying it was like millions or whatever that they pay out in the buyback, and so that's why you've got to have those upcharges. Like, what kind of excuse is that? You mean to tell me that you're that bad, like you're so bad at doing your job that you have to pay out millions and then you take it out on other people for the upcharges. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, A doesn't equal B there. Like, I get that you have to factor it in. Like, you might have to factor in the cost of, hey, we're going to have a certain amount of screw ups, so we'll change our price, on something. But that doesn't mean that you should change your mind and upcharge more because you're screwing up more, or you're screwing up at all. Like, if you made a screw up, like, or if an employee had only been there a week and he wasn't properly trained, or maybe he was properly trained and just had a bad day. If something was messed up in that way, that's your fault. Like, you have to take care of that. Like, you pay out that, but that shouldn't change like where you're going with like the upcharges. I mean, the upcharges on the front end, as long as you're doing something right, that shouldn't matter. Like, if you're going to, I don't know, I don't think those two should correlate in the same way that it come out. And I completely agree with Terry Lake on that, because he made that, I think I saw in the chat, he made that same comment. I just looked at chat a few times, and it's like, yeah, don't mess up. That doesn't equal, I mean, if you're messing up, that doesn't mean that other people should have to pay upcharges for something. But I don't know, maybe I'm looking at that a little differently from my end, because I'm not having to ever shell out those payments to people, but they don't cover the label anyways, right? So I guess it should just be when they graded a trimmed card, or they graded something that they shouldn't have, or they graded the wrong grade, and that's pretty tough to get them to admit to anyways. Like, if something's a 10 and you look at it like, this is clearly like a 7 or 8. There's some shadowless cards on Instagram. I can't remember the guy who's got them, but he's got like a Nido King or something. It's not a 10. It's definitely not a 10. But he can't get them to do the money guarantee or whatever it is. I didn't know that about the grader notes, so I want to talk about that. So I had no idea that they were adding in like reasons why certain cards get a grade at a higher tier value. I think that's great. I know CGC has already been doing that for a while, and when I got in my crossover for the Lugia, it was great to know, hey, exactly where on the card. They just put a little circle, and then when I looked at my BGS 9.5, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I see why it didn't cross over to 10. So if PSA is doing that too, I think that's great. I think that's really, really good to have, especially for those higher end cards. I did notice on my most recent PSA submission, it did have the pictures of the cards, but I knew that they had not been pulled out of the case yet, because they were still in the old sleeves that I had put them in, and I'd stuck them in some like Pokemon sleeves. So the backside didn't actually show the backside of the card. It was like showing Lucario or whatever it was, because I had a bunch of Elite Trainer sleeves. All right, and then the last thing that I want to touch on was something that was stated like right in the very beginning of the video. I came to the video actually to hear if they were going to talk about the timeline for when, this idea of the eBay vault, being incorporated with PSA. And I was not prepared to hear what I heard. If you go in the very beginning of the video, Nat says that he's been in talk with eBay since it's been 3 years. Going back to, I think he said February or March of 2021. I just sat back. I was like, are you kidding me? So I wasn't reached out about the eBay vault until it was March of 2022. So a whole year later. And I was one of the first 4 to ever send in. And we didn't even send in until June of that year. But I was pretty much fed that this was going to be a thing. This was going to be eBay's vault. It was going to be secure. And I mean, that's why I have a 25-year contract. Like, I can't state the details of it, but it is carrying over with PSA. But the thing is, like, it doesn't apply for new cards. It was just for that stuff. It was just the very beginning stuff. But I put my personal collection in there, and it took so long for them to get it to where I could actually do anything with it. The advertising and them using, my name to say, hey, he trusted, TCI Gamer trusted the collection here, so did these other sellers. Like, that was immediate. They took care of that immediately. They had their videographers, or whatever you want to call them here, the day that they picked everything up. So they had the cards, and they had all their advertising, but I wasn't able to sell it for quite a while after that. And this whole time, the past 2 years, I've been feeding them like all this recommendations, like, this is what you need to change, this is what you need to change, this is what you need to do. And I've been told that they're working on it, that it's coming, it's going to be better, the prices are coming down. And knowing that their whole plan, even a year before they even talked to me, was to sell it. It's like, why would they feed me all those lies? Like, I feel completely used in that way. Like, you could have just been straight up with me. Like, I wouldn't have went, so far as to find out like exactly how to get, through some of these glitches that they have, if I had known that these cards were just being used for advertisement and you're just trying to get acquired, send it on to somebody else. Like, if I had known that, then it would have been a completely different situation than what I sent to the eBay vault. Because I mean, a 25-year contract, I'm thinking, hey, I could just set this stuff here. It's going to be taken care of if I ever want to sell it. I've got that option. But, we've ran across those international issues, the glitching issues with listing products, with buyers being able to pay. Like, there's so many issues with buyers being able to just pay for things, right? And we've had these issues this whole time, and I would constantly bring them up. There were items that I could list that were in my vault. As soon as I listed them, they were no longer technically in the vault. And if they sold, then they'd be trying to tell me to ship it out, even though the product was in the vault. There were times where cards just went missing. Like, after a buyer bought them, they never shipped. My buyer got paid out. I got to keep my money, but where'd the cards go? I mean, all these issues, we've been working on. I say we, like I was actively trying to help them up until probably the last 6 months or so, and trying to figure out a lot of these things. Like, I made a Google sheet where I would list all these different issues, be like, hey, fix this one, fix this one, fix this one, and we'd take the things off the list as we went. And it was for what? Just so that they could sell out. And it makes sense why they didn't work hard on these big issues, because they knew they didn't have to. They knew that they didn't have to get the eBay international shipping up and going for the eBay vault. At least that's according, based off of what Nat says. If he was working with eBay a year before they even started reaching out to potential collectors to put things in the vault, then like, it was obvious, like this was a play that wasn't for eBay, it was for PSA. So that was really upsetting. Like, I feel like I was used in that way, and I guess I wasn't expecting it. I've got a really good relationship, I feel like, with eBay anyways. There are times where I've got issues with what go on, but most of the time I can talk with some of the guys that I work directly with, and we can figure it out. Like, we can figure out what the problem is, why it happened, and we can fix it. And then they'll take care of me if it was some kind of issue that was on eBay's end. Like, I had an issue recently with signature. So if you go into bulk shipping and you've got an item that requires signature because it's over $700, and you got another one that's not, bought from the same guy, when you go to combine them, it's actually going to remove that signature that would automatically be added typically. So if you buy something as a buyer and it's over $750, the seller has to add signature to it to be covered. Well, with eBay, they automatically add that option in, even if you do it individually or if you do it through bulk shipping. However, there's a glitch with the eBay bulk shipping where we believe if you combine them, I haven't been able to double check this just yet, but if you combine them, it will actually remove the signature, since there's an item in there that does not require signature. It already doesn't do it if you have like multiple items. So you had 4 $500 items and they were all combined. It's not going to add that signature. You have to do it yourself, but it's supposed to do it automatically if the order is over $750, because that's a requirement. So that's something that they need to work on. And it takes a lot of playing around, and you got to have a variance of sales to have that kind of glitch come through and to be able to figure out where it come from and diagnose it. And actually, I had the issue, it just so happened, I combined a 10 that was $1,000, and another item that was $400. The signature was removed because I combined them in bulk shipping, and then when I printed the label out, it went to the buyer. It showed as delivered. Buyer said he never got it. So you got to have a whole lot of stars kind of line up in a bad way for something like that to happen. But I ended up winning the smaller case, but I lost the bigger one, even though they were shipped together. And so we had to figure that out. So you can work through those kind of things, especially when you're working closely, with sellers that can help you out. And like I said, in this situation with the eBay vault, I feel like I was, my stuff was just kind of used as the advertisement, but it wasn't really presented to me in that way. I didn't realize that it was just going to be something that they sold off, and that my input really maybe it mattered for like immediate things that needed to be changed, but it didn't matter for like the long term, because what PSA is going to do is they're probably just going to incorporate eBay International Standard Delivery, so they'll just have that way. Now it separates the entities. eBay's not storing the product. Technically somebody else is, and then they ship it to eBay, they authenticate it, or I guess it goes right back, or I guess it just goes to their hub, and then it goes out it goes out to wherever it's supposed to go, depending on the service, DHL, FedEx, whatever it might be there. And I did come across one thing that I am very curious to see how it happens, because I have a Nine Tails. I've mentioned this before. First edition, it's PSA 9, right? So this card I sent, I didn't personally send it, I don't think. I think I bought it, but it went to PSA. You know, it's been authenticated, it's graded there. It was in my personal collection when the eBay Vault was initiated. I sent it to them. And so the way the eBay Vault works, if you guys don't know, so I shipped it from me, and it went through PSA because they were the authenticator to verify that everything was legit. And then it goes into the eBay Vault, where it's backed by eBay's guarantee that it is completely legitimate. So it's already been graded by PSA once. You know, somehow I got it. I shipped it to the eBay Vault, but it has to go through authentication, which PSA handled because it was a graded card. And then they sent it off to the eBay Vault, where they had physical possession of it. If you guys remember, I listed this card, and the time that it took from, you know, getting in the eBay Vault to when I listed it, something happened with the cert. There was a fake out there, and they deactivated the cert. So when I listed the item, it was removed. My account got hit with a ban, and I had to get that taken care of because it was obviously something that was in eBay's vault. It should be completely guaranteed and backed. And I went back and forth with eBay over and over and over, saying, hey, you guys, this should be guaranteed. You guys should take care of it if there's some kind of issue with it. There's no reason for you guys to ship it back to me, then me ship it to PSA, have them reholder it, PSA ship it back to me, then me ship it back to PSA to be authenticated, and then put it back in the vault. Right? That's just completely ridiculous. There's no reason to go that all the way around. But now eBay over here is sold the vault to PSA, so now everything's moving to the PSA vault. It's like, okay, so now PSA is going to have this card that is in their vault. It technically belongs to me, but it has a deactivated cert, but it's already been authenticated and verified by them twice and eBay once, and it's carried over, and it's even in the contract or whatever. So what are they going to do with that? If they list it, their account's going to get hit. So I'm hoping that they just give it a new certification number and take care of that process, since it's in the vault. I think that would be a great way to take care of any issues that come up like that. If it's already in the vault and they have to deactivate a cert because of a known counterfeit, obviously not the one that's in the vault, right? Hopefully they just go ahead and reholder it, give it its new cert, and then make it available to be sold again. So I think that is a plus that can come from this whole situation. But guys, I know that I've rambled on for a while here. I'm probably talking about a lot of things that might seem a little strange, and you're looking at this background that just says TCA5 or whatever. But I really appreciate you for taking the time to listen. I want you to know overall, I think that this could be a very, very hands-off way to sell cards. It could be really good, but it could also quickly add up. You know, like the fees could add up, and if you're not careful and they decide to just jack fees up or add storage fees or, you know, something like that, you might have a fight on your hands just to get your cards back. For that reason, I'm probably keeping the cards myself. You know, I'm going to be pulling most of what I have in the vault. I think we'll just have to see. I don't have a whole lot there. I haven't sent out a whole lot because I kind of saw the writing was on the wall when the structure started changing with the fees, and also with how they put things into the system. And I was a part of certain aspects of development and the process of being able to change out the titles and, you know, doing some Zoom calls, you know, with the Vault team. But I wasn't a big part of it. But I did get to see some of that. And it's happened before, you know. If you're part of the Troll and Toad Evo program, I think I'm technically not now. I'm supposed to be getting this stuff coming back. But, you know, everything was super cheap, super free, super fast in the beginning. And then, you know, it just got worse. The fees started added up. And I'm not saying that their fees were unfair, but it made it a whole lot more difficult to get your stuff back. It made it a whole lot more difficult to, you know, make the money that you thought you were going to make based off of the initial amounts that were being advertised. So you guys be careful with this vault, like any vault, like anybody. But the good thing is it's backed by a big reputable name. It's PSA, right? It was bought from eBay, so you got another big name there. So you got two names that are on the line here, I think, with this PSA vault. So that's a good thing. In my opinion, that's a good thing. And I think that there is an opportunity here for people to make money and not have to touch any cards at all. But just be careful with it. If you have any questions for anything that I said, my notes are pretty sparse. Like I said, I was just kind of jotting a few things down in between while I was doing shipments, and I'm sure there was a lot that I missed, and I think there were some other things I wanted to talk on, but I can't remember what they were, and this is already much longer than my normal typical video. But again, if you want to watch the interview yourself, it's an hour long. I mean, it's with Nat Turner, right? You know, he's a top guy at PSA, and he's come in there and he's talking. He even interacted with the chat. He called Dan out for something, which when I read it, Dan's comment, you know, you could tell he was just really being unbiased. But, you know, when sometimes you miss it, and Nat kind of snapped at him a little bit about it. It was when they were talking about signatures or something, and they said, don't use chemicals, I think, something along those lines. But then they said water was okay. And he was like, well, water and spit are technically chemicals. And he's right. You know, they are. And so I think it was more about where to draw the line, right? But anyways, it was a really good interview. This is the second one that he's done, but it's on Poke Knowledge Cards channel. Like I said, I'm going to put it down there in the description, so should be there. I'm going to try to have a little video thing here. If I remember correctly, I'll try to have it on the end screens. But you guys have a great day, and thanks for listening all the way to the end.